our brains work. So why would I do a talk like this? Because I don't have a lot to gain from doing a talk on the brain necessarily. And I'll tell you why. It's because I'm really passionate about speaking truth into this community. I see so many people who are sick, whose brains are dysfunctional. I have a good friend of mine whose mother right now is dying of Alzheimer's. That could have been totally prevented if he would have had some of this, or she would have had some of this information that I'm going to present. So I'm really, really passionate about how can I speak truth into the Lincoln community. Now, I'm certainly not the only one doing that, but I want to be one of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out tonight, and we're going to talk about the standpoint of how does our brain shrink? How are people actually shrinking their brains? And then you got some notes, and you can write down how we do the opposite. Okay, by the way, this talk is going to be repeated at Natural Grocers on the 23rd, Saturday the 23rd at 2 o'clock. So if you know somebody that you'd like to invite, it'll be done there also. So, why are we doing this? You don't want to waste these resources, time, money, energy, the value of good research, putting good information into action and enjoying the fruits of your good choices. If that's you, then if you want to do that, let's get busy shrinking our brains, okay? Loss of brain volume can cause a whole host of dysfunctions that can affect your life. Memory loss, cognitive dysfunction, mood and personality disorders. How many of you know that we have a lot of that in our culture? Yeah. With 11% of everybody in our culture taking an antidepressant drug, which I think is a lot. You have between the ages of 45 and 65, fully 1/4 or 25% of all women are on an antidepressant between those ages. So we have a lot of this going on. Accelerated Alzheimer's disease, increased healthcare costs, increased burden on your family, and reduced quality and quantity of life. I don't know if you know this or not, Alzheimer's is now the third leading cause of death in our culture. Does anybody know what used to be number 3? Anybody know what number 1 and 2 is?
Cancer and heart disease?
Cancer and heart disease first, cancer second. Used to be stroke.
Yeah.
Now it's Alzheimer's. So that's how much this has increased. In fact, when I was in chiropractic school back in the 70s, Alzheimer's was more of a footnote. It was a small paragraph in our neurology textbooks. Nobody ever heard of it. Nobody knew about it. Autism was the same way. Small paragraph in our neurology textbooks. Now there's an explosion in both of those things. By the way, every statement that I make is supported by, this is the scientific reference down here at the bottom. So the choice is yours. If you look at the difference between dementia and heart disease, cancer, and stroke, heart disease, cancer, and stroke, a lot of times will have a sudden onset, sudden painful onset. Dementia and Alzheimer's usually come on gradually and gently. Very few people suddenly get Alzheimer's. Very slow. These two, heart disease, cancer, can cause moderate to severe disruptions in function. Dementia and Alzheimer's cause major functional disruptions, but you get the sandbag and have others help you. Mind is usually intact with these, so you're fully aware of you and your family and friends suffering. Mind erodes away so you don't have to worry and stress over what your condition is doing to others. And you see that all the time. So modern research is demonstrating how our lifestyles are causing our brains to shrink. Genes have about 25% to do with this. How you treat your genes has about 75% to do with it. And coming down the road in a few months, I'm going to do another talk called How to Be a Geezer, extending your life in a stressful world. And we're going to talk about anti-aging in that talk. And this is a big part of that. So you explore the top 12 actions you can take to shrink your brain. Number one is reduce your water intake. Get dehydrated. Dehydration leads to brain symptoms, shrinkage, headaches, dizziness, brain fog, poor concentration, and mood swings. So that's pretty easy to solve. You just drink some good water. Okay. Just 2% of dehydration can make you stupid. All right. Number two, start reducing your sleep. Sleep is extremely important for maintaining metabolic homeostasis in your brain. You know, staying up too late, not getting enough sleep is associated with mitochondrial stress. Anybody know what the mitochondria are? You should know that. You went through dental school.
Yeah, it's the energy,
The power plants in your cells. Yeah. Yeah, the mitochondria are the power plants that make your body run. And each one of your cells has about 2,000 of them. And when your mitochondria become dysfunctional through bad diet or toxicity, which we're all exposed to, what happens is your cells begin to dysfunction and die. And when mitochondrial dysfunction will lead to cancer, and I have a whole talk on that in my cancer talk, which I show how that happens. But the mitochondria are really, really important. So when you don't get enough sleep, this stresses the mitochondria, and you get neuronal degeneration. Catching up on sleep debt on the weekend will not prevent this damage. So poor sleeping habits cause both brain damage and brain shrinkage, and even accelerate the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Now, when I look back on college, my college days, how many of you went to college and had a lack of sleep in college? Major lack of sleep. I mean, I'm surprised I don't have Alzheimer's now, you know, considering all the all-nighters I pulled and things like that. But lack of sleep has also been linked to obesity and hormone alteration. And this comes out of the journal Neurology, 2014, so about 3.5 years ago. Reduce or eliminate exercise. Live a sedentary lifestyle. While lack of sleep can lead to brain shrinkage, those who exercise regularly tend to have the least amount of brain shrinkage over time. So if you want to do something that will really make a big difference in keeping your brain volume whole, exercise. It says exercise actually causes your brain to grow in size. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands of who's exercising and who isn't. You know who you are. But this is a big deal, is exercise. Become and remain depressed. Recurring depressive episodes. Depression actually reduces a part of your brain called your hippocampus, which is really important in emotions. A smaller hippocampus equates to a loss of emotional and behavioral function. Now, do you know that there is a relationship, a correlation between exercise and depression? Everybody know that. People who exercise more are far less likely to be depressed. Okay? And exercise increases your brain volume. It actually protects you and from depression. By the way, there's a really good study about that out of Duke University. And this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it's pretty interesting. There's no extra charge for this tonight, by the way. Okay? When they did, Duke University did a study. I think this is back in 2007 or 2008. They did a study on antidepressant drugs. They had 3 groups. They had one group that took antidepressants. They had another group that did exercise only, and another group that did antidepressants and exercise. And what they found after 6 weeks is that the people that were taking the antidepressants were a little bit ahead of the rest of the group. They said after 12 weeks is the exercise only group that showed the most healing and the most progress in terms of depression. And they found that people that exercised, their depression stayed away much, much better than the people that were on the antidepressants. Now, how many of you ever heard that study on those antidepressant commercials they show on TV? Of course they're not going to show that, because they're not speaking truth. Those commercials, those drug commercials, are not speaking truth into this culture. And that's what we want to do here. Okay, number 5. Reduce your B vitamins in your diet. Stress reduces B vitamins. Excessive drinking. If you avoid green vegetables and grass-fed meats, you will have less B vitamins in your diet. According to the latest research, people with high levels of markers for vitamin B12 deficiency were more likely to score lower on cognitive tests, as well as have a smaller brain volume. Does anybody know what the marker is? This is a really hard question, but I'll ask anyway. Do you know what the marker is for vitamin B12? Best marker? So it's a test called methylmalonic acid, and that's one of the tests they use in this micronutrient panel right here. So when you get a B12 test, a blood test, the test for B12, your standard serum B12 test, that's really not nearly as accurate as methylmalonic acid, which is a much more accurate test, the B12 in your body that can actually be used and metabolized by your system. Okay, so lack of B12 may lead to brain shrinkage. Studies have shown that high doses of B6, B8, which is inositol, and we have that here in this form, inositol, and B12 in combination were very effective for improving schizophrenic symptoms, and low doses were ineffective. This is a real interesting study. Niacin, high doses of niacin are also very, or they can be very effective in schizophrenia. And this is an article I actually covered on my radio show several months ago, where a doctor back in the 50s was using niacin to cure schizophrenia. And what do you think happened to him?
He got put down.
Yeah, he was booted out.
Yeah.
He was booted out because drugs were all, that whole pharmaceutical thing was really coming into play back then. So he was basically fired from his job. And he had good research, and he was seeing results, but it wasn't a pharmaceutical, so he wasn't too welcome in the medical community at that time. Increase your alcohol intake. Drinking alcohol, there's actually a linear negative effect of alcohol consumption in brain volume. So the more alcohol you drink, the smaller your brain gets. This is something we should tell college students.
Yeah.
I mean,
On Thursday.
yeah, and when I went to college, nobody knew this. We thought it made your brain bigger. So anyway.
Does that include wine also?
Any alcohol. Yeah. The more you drink, the smaller your brain gets. Load up on prescription painkillers, especially narcotics. Painkillers, especially morphine, have been shown to shrink brain volume by 3% only after 1 month.
Is that reversible?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if it is. It might be. If you exercise, you might be able to reverse that. It's a really good question.
So painkillers like Aleve and Tylenol and aspirin and all that are not so bad?
There are some issues with that, but they're not as bad as like morphine and opioid analgesics. Number 8, increase your sugar intake. I mean, we're just getting out of the biggest sugar frenzy season, that we have from October 31st to December 31st. And, sugar is is a huge problem with brain function. What I'm going to tell you now is not part of this talk, but your brain actually produces its own insulin. Your pancreas produces its insulin, but this is something that researchers found out about 5 years ago. Your brain produces its own insulin because your brain uptakes glucose. And so when you eat a lot of sugar or consume a lot of sweets, what happens is that really imbalances the insulin levels in your brain, and that causes a lot of dysfunction in your brain. So I'm not saying you can never have sugar, but you really want to keep it to a very, very small amount because there is definite evidence. In fact, some people call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. Okay, that's how connected Alzheimer's is to sugar intake. So in my office, the way that we measure sugar intake, we measure it in 3 ways. Number one is, and that's all in this comprehensive blood panel I do. Fasting glucose is one. Hemoglobin A1C is another one, which tells us what is the average blood sugar over a 3-month period of time. And my favorite test of the 3 is fasting insulin. And when insulin levels start to go up, you know that your body is starting to lose its ability to metabolize sugar efficiently. You're starting to get insulin resistance. High insulin levels usually means high amounts of inflammation in the body. And so that's why I include that test in my comprehensive blood panel, because it gives me another way of looking at how is this person handling sugar. And so what that tells me, if their hemoglobin A1C is okay and their blood sugar is reasonably okay, but their insulin levels are higher or high, that tells me that their body is losing the ability to handle blood sugar. And I don't care what the glucose levels are, I don't care what the A1C levels are, that insulin is starting to go up. You're losing your ability to metabolize and handle sugar, and you've got to stop. There's only 2 ways that I know that you can get insulin levels down. Number 1 is quit eating sugar, and number 2 is high intensity exercise. Those are the 2 things that actually resolve high insulin levels. And that study was done, actually a whole book was written on that called The Obesity Code by a physician by the name of Jason Fung. And he looked at every single study on blood sugar and weight, and he was trying to figure out in this book, he was studying what causes people to get fat, what causes people to lose weight. He said the 2 things, you cannot eat sugar and you've got to do specific types of exercise if you're going to lose weight. So it has a huge effect on your brain.
Does this include like carbohydrates or
like fruit sugar?
Well, fruit or just like bread and potatoes and stuff like that.
Bread maybe, depends on how sensitive your insulin levels are. Potatoes maybe, but I wouldn't worry about that so much.
You're talking processed sugar.
I'm talking, this kind of sugar. Kind that we all crave at times. Processed sugar is primarily it. Yeah, I mean, if you have your insulin level is 4, you can eat bread and potatoes, and you're probably not going to have a problem. Okay. Saved you, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's another one. This is 9A. Increase your intake of trans fats. So if you want to shrink your brain, shop for lots of processed food. A diet high in trans fat shrinks the brain and increases the risk of dementia. And that's an article out of the medical journal Neurology. Trans fats are found in fast foods, processed foods, margarine, most of your processed foods. you know, potato chips, flaky pastries, fried foods, a lot of your fast foods. You know, this is where you find trans fats. And so you want to avoid that as much as possible. What do trans fats do, by the way? What is a problem with them? Does anybody know? Like biochemically? What do they do that's so bad?
Plastic. They have something in it that makes your cells plastic.
Yeah, you're on the right track, Kyle. This is exactly right. All your cell membranes are made of fat. Excuse me, fat. And so when you have unsaturated fat or saturated fat, it's a little bit more fluid, okay, especially unsaturated fat. But when you have trans fats are very, very rigid. And so your membranes have to be fluid in order to function. But once they get very rigid, and like Kyle said, plasticized, what happens is they don't work very well. They don't function right. The receptors on the cells that have to interpret hormone signals and insulin signals and things like that, they don't work very well. So trans fats make your cells rigid, and that's why you want to avoid those. And you can test for those. There's actually tests that we have that test the amount of omega-3, omega-6, your trans fats, and it gives you a ratio of the fatty acids in your body, and a ratio of a very high omega-6 to omega-3 shows that your body is increasingly becoming more inflammatory. There's more inflammation going on in your body. It's actually a very accurate and a very good test. And it also shows, that test also shows how many trans fats you're carrying. Now, you probably heard in here about canola oil being good for you. Anybody heard that? It's not, okay. Canola oil is actually a hydrogenated oil that contains about 40% trans fats. And that's what keeps the shelf life long. So you want to avoid canola oil.
Is there such thing as like non-GMO canola oil or organic canola oil or
No.
none? There's no kind
No.
of good canola oil.
No kind of good canola oil. None. You just want to avoid it. Because all canola oil is hydrogenated to preserve the shelf life. So it's about 40% trans fats. So, I mean, the idea that canola oil is healthy in our culture is another big lie that we have to debunk. You don't want to use it. You don't want to ever use it. Okay, 9B. Decrease your intake of healthy, unprocessed foods if you want to shrink your brain. So, study participants who ate diets high in vitamin B, C, D, and E, and omega-3 fatty acids were found to have larger, healthier brains than their junk food eating counterparts. So these nutrients are found in vegetables, fruits, fish, raw nuts, and seeds. By the way, what percentage of our brain is fat?
Pretty much all of it.
90,
Okay, 90, you're saying all of it? Okay,
90 to 100%.
okay. Anybody else? 60%. 60% of our brain is fat. So if 60% of our brain is fat, don't you think, first of all, that completely eliminates the whole idea of eating a low-fat diet. Because why do you want to do away with your nervous system? Okay, but you want to eat healthy fats because you want your brain to have healthy fat because your nerves are made of fat. Okay, so like omega-3 fatty acids are important. So again, what's a high? The Mediterranean diet is high in natural, unprocessed fats. Again, that's from the medical journal Neurology. 9D, eat 0 servings of brain food per day. So what are some of the things that are helpful for brain food? Curry, which is very anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective. Celery, which calms inflammation. By the way, this is not an exhaustive list of brain food. This is just some of them that were out there, and you know, I just threw up eight of them here, but there's more. Broccoli and cauliflower, Walnuts are high in omega-3 fats and antioxidants. Garbanzo beans have a lot of magnesium. Red meat has vitamin B12. You just want to get good quality red meat. Blueberries, high in antioxidants and healthy fats. Olive oil, avocado, salmon, grass-fed butter, coconut oil, free-range eggs are all have a lot of healthy fats. Now, that's assuming that you don't have food intolerances to some of this stuff, because I have patients who can't eat eggs because they're intolerant to them. So if you don't have an intolerance to any of these, they're great. And avocados, we use avocados in our smoothies. I mean, that's how and avocado is a great source of good, healthy fat. 9E, if you are male, eat more non-fermented soy. There's a real interesting study that brain atrophy progresses more rapidly in men who consume more tofu.
Really?
Now, when I was in chiropractic school, I ate a lot of tofu. But we didn't know any of this. That was in 1978, 79, and I ate it because I liked it. It kind of went with everything, and now I have a lot more profound understanding why we should avoid this. So here's the problems with non-fermented soy. It has a lot of estrogen in it, phytoestrogen. And let me just say this: neither men nor women, but especially men, we don't need estrogen. We need a little bit to be healthy, but we don't need very much. And too much estrogen begins to turn you into a woman. And I don't know of many men that want that. Phytates, they block your body's uptake of minerals, and they inhibit enzymes, which inhibit protein digestion, hemagglutinin, which causes blood cells to clump together and inhibit oxygen. They have high amounts of omega-6 fats, which are pro-inflammatory, and most soybeans are grown on conventional farms that use a lot of pesticides and genetically modified and genetically engineered plants. So, I don't know of a lab that's ever tested this for Roundup or glyphosate. But we know this. We know that, and if you've heard my radio show or you've heard me talk here before, we know that things like oats, non-organic oats, are very high in glyphosate. And glyphosate is what they use in Roundup Ready. And oats are very high in that. So if you eat oatmeal, you want to use organic oatmeal, not regular oatmeal. Okay, regular oatmeal is high in glyphosate. Okay, number 10, strive to be overweight or obese. An MR imaging study compared brain white matter volume in obese and lean middle-aged individuals. Those who were obese had significantly smaller white matter volumes than their lean counterparts. Again, that's the journal Neurology of Aging, 2016, so it's a fairly recent article. So you want to stay, at a good, healthy weight. Okay. So if you think about, the overweight person who eats a lot of processed food, drinks a lot of Coke instead of water, you can imagine it doesn't exercise. You can imagine what those people are doing to their brains. It's no wonder we have an Alzheimer epidemic right now. When you look at the way that people eat, the way that people take care of themselves, the amount of pharmaceuticals they take, it's amazing that anybody's brain can stay healthy. Number 11, promote type 2 diabetes through your lifestyle. Of course, this has to do with eating too much sugar. Again, type 2 diabetes ages your brain about 5 years faster than normal. Alzheimer's disease is common finding deterioration of the brain's ability to use and metabolize glucose. It leads to a decline in cognitive ability. This is in the Annals of Internal Medicine, 2014. So it's one of my favorite medical journals, by the way. So, if you have type 2 diabetes, you want to take as many steps as you can to fix that. And exercise, staying away from sugar, high intensity interval training, resistance training are all things that can really, really lower that insulin level, so you can really help that. Number 12, this is an interesting one, very interesting. Remain in chronic pain and avoid chiropractic care. This is a study that was done in the Journal of Neuroscience in November of 2004. Chronic low back pain causes the brain to shrink at a rate of 1.3 cubic millimeters per year, which is about a half inch, which is the equivalent of 10 to 20 years of normal brain aging. I mean, how many, have you ever seen a commercial that talks about this? No, I haven't, okay? So, you want to alleviate lower back pain. Chronic lower back pain shrinks your brain. Okay, and bonus number 13, subject your brain to repeated, unprotected trauma. There's an interesting study. Where was this done? Oh, this is in a neuropathology journal in 2017. They looked at 14 retired soccer players that had played an average of 26 years, and 6 of them had suffered concussions. And they studied these players for 30 years until their death, and they found that dementia, repeated traumatic brain injury led to CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which led to dementia, and a lot of these people had these brain-type neurological diseases when they got into their 60s. And it was worse to head people than the ball. So, so you wonder, well, what sports can my kids play? Heading a soccer ball or heading anything is very, very hard on your brain and really causes a lot of problems. So, chiropractic affects brain function in some really positive ways. This was in a journal called Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine last year. Another study that I really like. This was done at Tohoku University in Japan, and it showed that when somebody's adjusted, that it activates a part of your brain called the cingulate cortex, which has to do with learning, emotions, and memories. It increases activity in the cerebellum, which is right back here, which has to do with spinal proprioception, posture, movement, and it's a big area for processing emotions. It reduces the activity in the somatosensory cortex, which is pain reception. That's why when people are adjusted, they have less pain, because that's actually happening at the level of the brain. And it decreased salivary amylase, which is a marker of stress. So when they adjusted these people, and then they tested their amylase, and they did this PET scan on their brain, this is what they found. So if you can decrease pain, and if you can increase your brain function, you can increase how well your brain actually works. So this is the shrink your brain lifestyle right here. Eat lots of processed food, drink lots of alcohol, live with chronic pain, eat lots of burgers, don't show up for your appointments, get plenty of sedentary lifestyle, couch time, eat at McDonald's a lot. I feel sorry for that kid. Or what you need to stop doing? Well, so the shrink your brain lifestyle to increase your brain is to eat whole foods, exercise, get plenty of sleep, drink water, eat the Mediterranean diet, and then getting adjusted helps. So this is action steps for you and those you care about. So if you want to shrink your brain, just pick one unhealthy behavior a day and reward yourself every day that you stop doing it. So you can either shrink your brain or you can save it. The choice is yours. Any questions?
I agree with everything you said, but there's an anomaly that I'm wondering about. Ronald Reagan, from outward appearance, he appeared to do the healthy things, and yet he had Alzheimer's.
I'll tell you why he did. Okay, I was at his library this summer.
Cool.
Okay, I went through his library, Ronald Reagan Library. Ronald Reagan was addicted to jelly
I was
beans.
just gonna say that, yeah.
He ate jelly beans
His
constantly.
favorite, yep.
Food
Sugar.
coloring and sugar.
Sugar gun.
They were all over the place. He never went anywhere without a big jar of jelly beans. So Ronald Reagan basically sugared himself, sugared his brain to death.
Interesting.
That's why he got Alzheimer's. He was addicted to it.
I always wondered.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I'm reading a book, I believe the name's Kevin Block. He has the Block, are you familiar with that? The Block Integrative Medicine in Chicago.
I don't know if I'm
How
familiar
great,
with it or
he
not.
talks about life after cancer, and basically everything you've said is what he says after you've dealt with the initial cancer diagnosis. The hardest part is maintaining that remission, and everything you've mentioned here tonight is closely related to what he recommends, including the high.
Help a lot
Mhm.
with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I would say that this is probably a prevent cancer lifestyle as well as keeping your brain healthy. Definitely. Anybody else? Any questions?
Yeah, do you think stress could have been easily one of the additional items on here?
Sure it could, yeah. Because elevated cortisol will have an effect on your brain. In fact, I ran across a real interesting article on that after I put this all together, and I was going to put it in, and then I forgot. But yeah, it's a good point. Yes.
How about family history?
Family history. Family history plays into it a little bit, but if you do the things that we talked about, you can avoid it. Just it's like you have a family history of cancer. If you have a lifestyle that's very wholesome and very healthy, your chances of getting cancer go way down. So I wouldn't count that as big of a factor. Now, if you have a family history, and you don't exercise, and you eat a lot of sugar, and you eat a lot of trans fat, then I would say those genes are going to catch up with you. But there's a whole science now called epigenetics that says you can change your genes based on what you eat and how you think. So that's a real important thing to consider when you think of family history. If you have a family history, you just want to be careful that you don't do the things that, bring those genes, turn those genes on, basically. You want to keep them off. Anybody else?
Whatever happened to Lance Schwartz? He used to show up. Lance Schwartz?
I don't know.
haven't seen him for a long
No,
time.
haven't seen him. No, haven't seen him. Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah. Would you say, you gave 3 things on the test that you give on how you can tell a person metabolizes sugar.
Yeah, fasting glucose is one.
Was your best one?
No, that's
Oh.
not my best one. Fasting insulin.
Oh,
is my best
fasting,
one.
that's right.
Fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, and fasting insulin. Those are the 3. But the one I like the best is fasting insulin.
Is that standard by most doctors if they were going to do a diabetes test on you or something? Do they do that, or is that just what ones that you choose, or is this the
The
standard procedure?
hemoglobin A1C and the fasting glucose are pretty standard. They're done by just about everybody. I don't know a lot of them that do insulin levels. I haven't seen a lot of tests that people have brought in that have insulin levels. So I can't be the only one that's doing it, obviously, because otherwise they wouldn't offer the test.
Mm-hmm.
But I utilize that test a lot. It's a great test.
What does it involve to do the fasting glucose? What do you
Just a blood test, fasting blood test.
come in fasting?
Yeah, that's all you got to do. So 2 weeks from now, we're going to do holistic cardiology. I'm going to demonstrate our heart sound recorder machine, how it works, how it can, why it works, how it can tell you things about your heart that other things can't tell you, and how it can tell you things about your health that other things cannot tell you. So we're going to do that in 2 weeks, and right here. Hope you can, some of you have been to that class already, some of you haven't, but like to see some of you come to that want to see how we can look at your heart and tell a lot about your nutritional status based on what we're seeing in your heart function. And so we'll probably have some demonstrations where we pick people out of the audience and run the test on them in front of everybody, and I'll show you what we find. Any other questions? Great, thank you so much. You're a great audience, appreciate it. And did you find the notes helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Good, good. My friend did the notes.